Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier was not merely a boxing trilogy. Yes, it was three great fights that will be in boxing history forever. But it was more than just fighting. Joe Frazier said after the third fight, he said, "It's more than a fight. It's about me and him." And for Joe, beating Ali was everything. For so many years after he had retired, the only picture of Ali he hung on the walls was when he had Ali down. He had pictures of all the greats: Joe Frazier, Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson. But the only one of Ali was when he knocked him down. That was the hate he had for Muhammad Ali. So I'm gonna go over their rivalry, not just do a breakdown of their fights. I'm actually not really gonna do that. It's a breakdown of their rivalry, how they got started, a few instances of why they hated each other, and why it felt so real. So, believe it or not, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were friends. It was a time when Ali was suspended. He couldn't get his license. And Ali really had no means of getting money. The black Muslims were supporting him, but he really didn't have that much money to survive until he started doing the talks in college, when he started to talk on college campuses. So his good friend Joe Frazier, he would let him borrow money. Not a lot, just enough so he could have food and groceries and that. So he let him borrow money tons of times, and he actually commissioned several state organizations to reinstate Muhammad Ali. None of them said yes, of course, but he kept asking them to do it, and his manager's like, "Joe, what are you doing? He's gonna whoop you. This Cassius Clay guy is good." He was Muhammad Ali, but they would call him Cassius Clay still. We're like, "Dude, he's good." And he's like, "Hey, he's my friend. It's not all right to take a man's pick and axe." That's what he would say. Even though he didn't agree with Ali's stance militarily of not going to the military, not going to war, he said the government has no right of taking a man's pick and axe, which means a man's only way of sustaining his life. So the beef started when they both were in a talk show, in a radio show, and Muhammad Ali started calling Joe Frazier Uncle Tom and a coward, and talking about how he would whoop him. And then Ali told Joe Frazier to meet him at the PAL gym in Miami, and which he went with a bunch of his friends, and the gym was very crowded, and Joe went, and Ali just went off, you coward, you Uncle Tom," and kept talking about him like that. And Joe took off his shirt, and they were gonna fight until like the cops showed up. And then Ali's like, "All right, meet me at the park." And he had all this group meet him at the park, but Joe Frazier didn't show up at the park. Then at another talk show, they met, and Ali met him across the street, and they got in a scuffle again. And Ali just kept calling him all these nasty names and nasty comments about him. And Frazier went to his house, and there was a few members of the black Muslims in there, and they were scary dudes at that time. But Joe Frazier was never intimidated of anybody. So he went in the room, and he's like, "Hey man, what's up? Why would he do that?" He's like, "Man, Joe, it's just fun, Joe." He's like, "Man, all these damn Muslims got you messed up." And he's like, "Don't talk about my religion, Joe." And Frazier's like, "Man, fuck your religion. I'm gonna get you, Ali. I'm gonna get you. You don't do that to a man." He said, I'm coming. And when they were friends, Joe Frazier promised Muhammad Ali that he would do an even split, a 50-50. And now that Ali had done that to him, he said, "You ain't getting no even split. That's for damn sure." But Frazier said, "Man, I can't believe I trusted this man." So after their encounters, Frazier wanted even more for Ali to get his license back, because he wanted to whoop him. He wanted to prove now that he was a better man, that he ain't no Uncle Tom. And how silly those comments from Ali were is George Foreman says that Frazier told him, he's like, man, I don't want my wife to think that I'm looking at women, that I'm peeking through their windows. Frazier thought that Ali meant he was a peeping Tom. He didn't even know what an Uncle Tom meant. So he wanted to get his payback. And once the fight was signed, he's like, yes. Because he finally got that chance. Finally got that chance to prove Ali wrong. And it was a blood feud. In the first really physical encounter, it was supposed to be like a mock fight for a commercial. And they threw some soft punches. And Frazier just threw a left hook to the body, a hard left hook. And Ali's like, oh, man, I'm done. And Frazier's like, yeah, that's right. You felt it. You felt when I buried you to the body, son. But all of Ali's comments, all his talking, all his raving got to him. And that was the whole point of Ali's mind games. And there's always that guy that really can't take a joke and he gets offended. And that was Frazier. But with Frazier, that's dangerous because you got a man that could fight. One that could dig you to the body and really end your career. And that's what these two men did to each other. In fact, Ali stressed Frazier so much that Frazier started having high blood pressure. And Ali had spies in Frazier's camp. He even went once and he was dressed up and Frazier's like, man, I know that was Ali. He said, I would recognize Ali even if he was dressed like Moses. So the night of the fight came and it was the morning and Muhammad Ali calls Frazier on the phone and he tells him, Joe Frazier, you ready? Frazier says, I'm ready. Ali says, I'm ready too, Joe Frazier, and you can't beat me. You know what? Joe Frazier said, you preach that you're one of God's men? Well, we'll see. And Ali says, you're scared. He just says, hey, Ali, just be there and don't be late. Frazier finally got his moment. And before he went into the ring, he knelt down and he's like, God, protect me. Save both of us. And he said, God, allow me to kick this motherfucker's ass in a prayer. And man, this is the fight. The fight of the century. That's the only way that this fight could be classified. The first Frazier-Ali fight. And man, these two men, they went to war. Ali not able to move around as well as he used to. And Frazier with his tenacity, with his willingness, with his heart, he was not going to fall that night. He was not going to lose. And Ali would talk to him during the fight like he did to every opponent. And he said, don't you know I'm God? You can't beat me. Frazier just kept throwing and said, well, God's going to fall tonight. That last round, that 15th round, brutal fight. I'm sorry. Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to break down this fight, but just some main points. That last round where Joe Frazier dropped Muhammad Ali is probably the most relished moment in Frazier's career, and that won him the fight. After the fight, both fighters went to the hospital. Ali for his jaw, and he got x-rays, and his jaw wasn't broken or anything, but Joe Frazier went because he had a kidney infection and his high blood pressure was off the roof. So he went, and Ali would later say this in a talk show where they were both together. He's like, man, Joe, I was in the hospital for a day. You were in there for a month. Frazier said, yeah, but you lost. You lost. And Ali could not accept it at that time. And it was a talk show where Eddie Futch had talked with Howard Cosell. Man, I don't like that, man. And he had talked to Howard Cosell and he said, I will only agree to this talk for Joe to do this talk show if you sit between them. He's like, I bet on my life. They sat right next to each other. And this is the infamous talk show before the second fight when Muhammad Ali kept calling him an Uncle Tom. And that hurt Frazier, and that hurt Frazier's family. And Frazier would say, man, if he only knew how much that hurt my kids. But Frazier got up. He's like, hey, man, what's up? What's up then? You calling me an Uncle Tom? What's up? And he's like, sit down, Joe. Sit down, Joe. And he got up and he grabbed his shoulders and he knocked him down. And they started tussling on the ground. And he's just like, sit down quick, Joe. Sit down quick. That much was their animosity. That's how much these two men disliked each other. And their second fight, not the classic that the first, and definitely not the classic their third fight would be. It really solved nothing. Muhammad Ali was clinching throughout the second fight. The referee didn't warn him at all. And it really did nothing to solve the rivalry. And it was before the third fight where the ugly side of Ali came out. The most vile and even racist part of Ali came out. The part where he kept calling him an Uncle Tom, yes, but he came out with another surname for Joe Frazier. A gorilla. He called his fellow black brother a gorilla. And this is definitely one of the biggest character flaws of Muhammad Ali. This proud black man didn't go to Vietnam because the Viet Cong never called me a nigger, right? That's why he didn't go to Viet Cong. And here he was calling a fellow black brother a gorilla. And it was one of the ugliest parts of his career. Ali mocks him and he says, Joe Frazier should give his face to the wildlife fund. He's so ugly, blind men go the other way. Ugly, ugly, ugly. He not only looks bad, you could smell him from another country. What will the people in Manila think? We can't have a gorilla for a champ. They're gonna think, looking at him, that all black brothers are animals, ignorant, stupid, ugly. If he's champ, other nations will laugh at us. Call us pig farmers. Can't have it. And Joe Frazier actually had his own spy, Gypsy Joe Harris, which was a big friend, a sparring partner of his in the past. And he went back to him and he was a bit hesitant of telling Joe what Ali had said. And he's like, come on, tell me. And Gypsy Joe told him, he's like, yeah, he called you a gorilla, all this other stuff. You can smell you in another country. And Joe said, all right. And he was pissed. And he went to Eddie Futch and he said, Eddie, for the love of God, do not stop the fight in Manila. Frazier would rather have died at that moment than let Ali beat him. And what transpired in Thrilla in Manila was one of the hardest 14 rounds ever fought inside a ring. And I'm not just saying this because this is Muhammad Ali week, because Ali is one of my favorite fighters of all time, but because this is true. They pushed the human body in a way that I don't think had ever been pushed before. Maybe in the times of the 30, 40, 50 round fights, I think this took the spirit of like a Jack Johnson, the Stanley Ketchels, those type of fighters, John L. Sullivan's, Jim Jeffries, those fighters that could fight 30, 40 rounds. This had 30 or 40 rounds of action packed into 14 rounds. The hatred, that animosity, and those body shots that Ali took and that Joe Frazier gave. Muhammad Ali was pissing blood for a while after that fight. Joe Frazier said, man, how is this motherfucker still up? And Muhammad Ali wanted to quit several times. After the 11th, he said was where he wanted to quit. And this was the closest he had ever been to experiencing death in a ring or in life. That's how intense this fight was. And when Eddie Futch stopped the fight, Eddie Futch just looked around and he said he was remembering the first Muhammad Ali fight and how Frazier got him in the last round and how Ali was exhausted. But he was thinking of his fighter's health. And he's like, no, I gotta stop this fight right now. And of course, Joe Frazier said, you can't do that. He said, you can't do that to me. But Eddie Futch was just looking out for his fighter. But these both men, they refused to lose to each other. I think they both would have died that night. Had it come to it, they both would have died. Ali took some horrendous body shots, and Joe Frazier took a right hand to his jaw that had his mouthpiece flying up to the 7th row. This was more than a fight. This was more than a rivalry. As Frazier put it, he's like, it was between me and him. As in the purest sense of who was the better man. And in the 3 fights, it was proven that in the fight sense that Ali was a better man. And this ate at Frazier, which he later came to gripes with because of Ali's health condition. And he said, that's all right that Eddie Futch stopped the fight because he was okay in health. But he still hated Muhammad Ali so much years after the fight. Like I said, he had that poster on in his house, at his gyms. He had that poster of Ali laying on his ass everywhere. When Ali lit the torch at the 96 Olympics, he's like, man, I hope he falls in the fire. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think Joe Frazier died. I think Joe Frazier died hating Muhammad Ali. Like, I hope I'm wrong about that. But I think the hate was so strong in him. This rivalry so deep. Muhammad Ali's words were so cutting, so insulting to his essence that Joe Frazier could never let it go. Muhammad Ali, of course, the winner of this fight. But after the fight, he had kidney damage. He was peeing blood. He had a bunch of bumps on his head. And this ended both of them. Frazier had like 2 fights after this fight. One, a rematch against George Foreman, bad idea. And another one later, like in the 80s, where he shouldn't have been fighting at all. Muhammad Ali should not have fought after this fight. And this fight is one of the reasons of the way he is, of all the wars that he was in throughout his career. This was his hardest fight. This was probably the hardest fight ever fought in boxing history. At least one that we have recorded like this. A whole fight that's recorded. No other fight can compare to this. No other rivalry could grasp the animosity of these two. No other 2 men in a boxing ring hated each other more and wanted to do more damage to each other than these 2 men. The saddest part is that neither of these fighters had a happy ending. Of course, Muhammad Ali has Parkinson's syndrome, and Joe Frazier, he passed away a few years ago, and the fact that he had to close his Smoking Joe's gym tells me that he wasn't in the best place financially. For all these men gave us, for everything they put their bodies through, it's a damn shame what they had to go through at their old age. At least Joe Frazier finally got that statue in Philadelphia. Both these men's legacies are set as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time and as having one of the greatest rivalries in boxing history.